should we put? Thanks, Cody. Welcome everybody. We're going to go ahead and start the Community Development Commission for November 16th, 2022 at 3:34, and we'll start with the roll call.
Chair Villarreal.
Present.
Commissioner Hughes.
Sure.
Commissioner Lopez.
Sure.
Commissioner Padilla.
I am here.
Commissioner Torres.
Here.
Commissioner Watkins.
Not yet.
Commissioner Marquez.
Yeah.
All right, we have a quorum.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. So we'll move on to approval of the agenda. Are there any changes from staff?
Madam Chair, we have one change if the commission desires, which is that we were hoping that we would have our entire Midtown Community Development Plan ready to review. We don't. So I'm happy to give an update when we get to that agenda item, but it's not, there's no content yet.
Okay,
to talk about.
So in the presentation, it says Midtown and Community Development Plan Progress Report. So since Lee's not here and it's not the official development plan, you want to just go ahead and
I can just give a timeline of where we are.
Okay, sounds good. Any other changes from commissioners? No. All right. Can I get a motion then? I move to accept the agenda as amended.
Commissioner Padilla, second.
Give us a second. We have 2 seconds, but we'll give it to Commissioner Padilla. All right, so let's get a roll call then.
Chair Villarreal.
Yeah.
Commissioner Hughes. Commissioner Lopez.
Yes.
Commissioner Padilla.
Yes.
Commissioner Torres.
Yes.
And thank you.
Thanks, Shani. Moving on to the approval of the minutes from our October 19, 2022 meeting. Are there any changes from staff?
No, Madam Chair.
No changes. Any changes from the commission? Seeing none, what is the measure of the move to approve the minutes? Got a motion? Second by we're here. Second by Commissioner Hughes. Can we get a roll call, Tony?
Chair Villarreal. Commissioner Hughes. Commissioner Lopez.
Same.
Commissioner Padilla.
Yes.
Commissioner Torres.
Yes.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Moving on to presentations, Alex will give us just an update on the progress of the Midtown and Community Development Plan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I don't, in lieu of a presentation, what we are looking at now as a time frame for the Community Development Plan is that it will be presented at the governing body meeting on November 30th to be complementary to the Midtown Master Plan and the rezoning application that will be on the agenda for that special meeting for approval, review and approval, hopefully approval, maybe not. I guess we'll wait and see, right? But I think it's really important because there were so many pieces of the Community Development Plan that were designed to inform the Midtown Master Plan, to reflect the priorities that the community expressed during various public engagement meetings and events and activities and from our public engagement partners at Midtown. So the other thing that'll happen on November 30th is a resolution will be introduced that would adopt the Community Development Plan as the city's official Midtown planning policy. So it's just for introduction. It won't be discussed at that meeting, but it will be on the agenda to be approved on November 14th. So on November 30th, the governing body Sorry,
You said November.
did I say November? December, that next month. Oh my gosh, I'm still like thinking it's September. So the approval timeline would be on November 30th, all of the official, the ordinance and the zoning application, the legal items are approved, and on December 14th, the policy document would be adopted officially through the resolution. One question for this commission is, because of the schedule of the end of the year commission meetings, it was really important for the applicant team, which is the staff team and the consultants, to bring the community development plan in its final form to this body, in addition to the Economic Development Advisory Committee. I don't think it's going to go to Finance Committee at all, but then Public Works Committee before the December 14th meeting. We have a meeting scheduled for December 7th because we always schedule an early December meeting just in case we need it. Usually it's the holidays and the end of the year and we skip it. So that's a question for the commission. Are you all willing to meet on that day to discuss this really important document? And you would be, you're in an advisory capacity, so you could recommend changes or edits or approvals or disapprovals or whatever you felt was appropriate.
So that would be December
7th. It's the Wednesday.
3:30 again.
And is that also, is there quality of life?
Yes.
Okay, so, and it will go to quality of life that night as well. So you will have a head start.
And then just to cover, you said the special meeting we're having on November 30th will consider the master plan and rezoning application at that meeting. And at that same meeting, the resolution that will ask for recommendation for approve the community development plan will be introduced.
Correct.
But then it will go through committees, just a couple, so that we can hear it
yes
on December 14th. That makes sense, everybody?
Yeah.
Do you understand the differences? What we will be hearing at the governing body, which is the master plan and rezoning application, and then what's separate is the resolution for the community development plan. And Alex can explain the difference if people are unclear about that. And then we also have a question, but why don't we just clarify that first?
Okay, so the master plan and the rezoning application have to be approved through city code because you're actually changing the zoning map. So that's an ordinance, that's a regulation change that the city council, the planning commission isn't allowed to make that change because it's a city ordinance. So the governing body will be making that determination on November 30th. It's a special meeting just to talk about Midtown. The community development plan will be available also for any kind of discussion or questions, but it's not acted on at that meeting. Rather, a resolution will be introduced that proposes adopting the community development plan as the policy that guides the implementation of the master plan. And it won't, the resolution itself basically doesn't say a whole lot. It says like, all of these conditions exist and we
need a plan.
Therefore, yeah, accept the Midtown Community Development Plan as our policy document. And then that the actual community development plan will go through committee conversations and discussions, and any changes will be recommended through that process so that what the resolution will adopt on December 14th has already been commented on and had any kind of committee comments incorporated.
Okay, so we'll start with questions. Commissioner Padilla, you had your hand up earlier.
I do. Alex, I thank you, Madam Chair. Alex, thank you for that quick synopsis. I understand. My question was in relation to our ability as a commission to comment on that. And now that you've explained at our December 7th meeting, the commission will be able to make comments, recommendations, et cetera, for that resolution, and not necessarily a review or approve, but just make comments to the governing body for their consideration. So that's the way I understand it. Am I correct?
Commissioner Padilla, you are mostly correct.
Okay.
The comments, the resolution itself isn't that meaty of a document. It should just be expressing the intent of the governing body to use the community development plan as its policy for
Correct.
midtown development. So you will actually be able to review the plan itself.
Good.
And provide comments. If there are points of confusion, you know, we just want it to go through the advisory process to make sure it's the best plan that it can possibly be by the time it gets to council on December 14th.
Great. So, Madam Chair, Alex, then we would be reviewing the master plan amendment and the rezoning application that is being presented for consideration through a resolution to the governing body. So we will be able to comment. Thank you.
Commissioner Padilla, no. You'll be reviewing the community development plan, which is the policy document that accompanies the Midtown master plan. So the Midtown master plan and is rezoning, that's the law, those are the ordinance changes that the governing body will approve on or consider for approval on November 30th.
Okay.
December 14th, if all goes well, they would pass a resolution adopting the community development plan as the policy document that guides the implementation of the master plan, if that makes sense.
When will we be able to see the community development plan?
So it should, yes, so it should be available on November 30th.
Okay.
For the governing body meeting, which really means the Friday, well, no, that's Thanksgiving week. It'll be available, if not by the end of this week, the very beginning of the week of November 28th.
Madam Chair, Alex, thank you. And thank you for clarifying what and where we will be reviewing the information from Midtown. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions on Zoom from commissioners? If not, I'll go to Commissioner Hughes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just curious at the November 30th meeting, what is the zoning going to go from and then to?
So the zoning will
MU
go,
or R1?
it goes right now, it's got sort of a strange, it's the general plan designation is institutional, but the actual zoning category is R5 or something that makes no sense for that. I mean, I think it kind of maybe, I don't know. I think even the surrounding neighborhoods are a little bit denser than that. So the idea is that the whole entire thing gets rezoned to commercial 2, C2,
C2.
which is really our multi-use zoning designation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I want to go to mixed use PUD.
I think it's,
Which is just like the C2, but that's the official.
possibly, it's the same. Yeah, I'm sorry, that's a good question for our planning, our land use people.
Yeah.
It's the, yeah, it's the same, it's the same end result, which is the C2 zoning, which allows the mixed use and the high, that has no density, only has height limitations, not density limitations.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Any other questions about that process?
Thank you for clarifying that.
And I think it is PUD. For some
The
reason
PUD,
that's
yeah,
stuck in my head. So I guess the question for everyone is if we want to have a meeting so you all can weigh in and offer comments on the community development plan for December 7th.
Yes.
Yes, I think so.
And if we're all available at 3:30, I think.
What do you guys think? Can you make it? We got 1 out of 2 can make it.
We don't know what for this.
right? But the three of you can,
Yes.
Commissioner Padilla,
Yes, I'm available.
Mr. Marquez, are you available?
I'm available for November the 30th, but I already have a meeting for the 7th of December.
So we should have a quorum anyway, but we'll definitely get that to you, Commissioner Marquez, so you can see it as well. And if you want to provide any written comments, or if you have questions, we could probably do that via email. Or
Yes.
I can, but the
Yes.
staff can.
Yes, definitely.
All right, I did have one question. There is a draft of the community development plan, and it was October 18th version. Is that
Mhm.
still the most updated version?
It's not.
Okay.
There's a version with today's date on it, in fact.
Okay.
So yeah, so it's, the basic organization hasn't changed at all. We've just spent time working to make sure that the language, let me put it this way, the lawyers started reading it and wanted to make sure that the language didn't conflict with what's in the master plan. So we have it's a lot of wordsmithing.
Okay. And then where can we find it? At a moment there, that version, the most updated version isn't.
It's not finalized yet. It's supposed to get finalized by tomorrow morning,
Okay.
and then it'll go into the governing body packet.
Okay. Or it can also be found on the Midtown.
I don't know. They told Susan they weren't making any updates right now, right?
I think there's like a sketch of it in the Midtown site, but they aren't doing any substantial updates. They won't do any press releases. They might have made room for the plans.
Okay, so we'll make sure that the committee gets it though.
Yeah,
as soon
I
as
just
it's
think it
available.
should be accessible to the public to see, and they're not gonna go through necessarily CrimeGov, which is a pain in
Yeah.
the butt. And so I'd rather it be on the Midtown website,
And I'll ask Danielle,
because it will say draft,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it would just be helpful to have that accessible.
Do you want me to ask you right now? Or
let's ask Danielle.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll have December 7th special. Would that be considered special? Or is it already in the calendar?
It's already on the
Okay,
calendar.
okay, so it's
Mhm.
regular CDC. And then we'll just get that to you all. Staff will get that so that you all can weigh in. Any other questions? No?
Nope.
So
December 7th, 3:30.
December 7th, 3:30 here or hybrid actually. All right, we'll move on to our discussion item, which is goal setting exercise for a 5-year consolidated plan required to be submitted to the Department of Housing and Urban Development as a condition to the city's community development block grants. And I'll hand it over to who from staff will want to start.
I can start, but then I want to hand it over as well, because I think we have this meeting every year in November to think about what are our funding priorities for the upcoming funding cycle? Has anything emerged as a super hot topic or gaping need? What's changed? What is our approach? Are we going to kind of do what feels good, which is to give everybody a little bit, or are we going to really focus on moving the needle on a big catalytic project? And generally, it seems that it works, that we try to touch every need and every priority. But we this year will be initiating our consolidated planning process and our strategic housing plan. So those are the two big 5-year documents that are required by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. So that's a consolidated plan, and a chapter of that you guys approve every year. We update the annual action plan, which is sort of a chapter of the consolidated plan every year to reflect the funding recommendations for that upcoming year. But this year we're doing the whole plan. So there's a pretty detailed goal setting section, priority section. There's a housing market analysis. There's a strategic plan, which is sort of folds in this idea of the goals and being able to plug the data in to best make the right or the best funding decisions, most impactful funding decisions. So what we thought we'd do today is go through an exercise on a staff level. The three of us just kind of bounce back a few ideas that we thought were compelling in terms of goals, looking at the spectrum of housing needs. So, you know, the idea, the concept that if your programming is only as strong as your weakest link. So if you're not addressing the needs of the entire spectrum, then you are, you can't have a great homeownership program, for instance, if you don't have any affordable rental programs, because all of your renters will be financially stressed and cost burden and not be able to save for down payments and possibly have too much debt or problematic credit scores or whatever. So this idea that every bit needs to be supported and as functional and as possible. So that's kind of where we came up with these goals. These are just us coming up using our current goals as a basis, but just kind of expanding them out, but also being able to relate them now to the MFA's set of housing actions from the strategic plan that is about to be finalized. So, so that was helpful because that kind of gave us a guidepost for looking at our current goals and kind of expanding them out a little bit. So I'll turn it over to, oh, so sorry. I'll turn it over to Cody and Susan, and they can walk us through kind of how we organized our thoughts on this and coming up with what we're calling a logic model, Lisbon-based logic model.
Yeah, I guess I'll go ahead and start. We did want to kick it off with a seemingly unrelated slide. This is a snippet from the executive summary of MFA's statewide housing strategy. Because typically with goal setting exercises, you do want to start with some data. And since we are in the beginning of that data collection phase and are just bringing on Root Policy to be our consultants for our strategic plans, we actually haven't done that. So I figured we could kind of draw on from MFA's work. And they found these 5 areas to have the highest impact actions. And they're all fairly obvious. First being producing housing across the income continuum, preserving and improving existing affordable housing, redeveloping underutilized and vacant properties, building home ownership opportunities, creating housing stability, and perhaps the most important, advocating for effective federal housing policies. What I really like about this page is that they break it down even further into more specific and actionable recommendations. So for instance, housing for individuals experiencing homelessness, they have like permanent supportive housing, pre-development funding, rental assistance, and that kind of thing. Like Alex said, we did our version of a logic model. I'm sure all of you had some exposure to logic models in the past, but they're pretty much a representation of a theory of change. And it usually shows the relationship between the inputs, the activities, outputs, outcomes, and then ultimately the impact of a program. But we decided to break it down. Well, since in our case, the inputs and resources are always the same. It's the CDBG, the trust fund monies, the capacity of our program partners and local developers, the support of local philanthropy, and the capacity of city departments and political will, including affordable housing staff and the commission. So we decided to break it down and have it sort of strategy based, which we're defining as broadly applied programming, funding, and technical assistance to inform the actions. The actions, which are what you do with the resources at hand to create and deliver the outputs, which are the direct product of the actions and activities, and the outcomes, which we broke down even further into short-term changes in learning and awareness, medium-term changes in action, and long-term, which is changes in condition. And these are our preliminary goals that we came up with, and this is where we would like you to chime in initially. we figured our community would be better if chronic homelessness is ended. There's housing stability for all. There are expanded choices for affordable rental opportunities. There are expanded choices for affordable home buying opportunities. Homeownership is sustainable in terms of economic and energy. And then this is our grab bag, all-encompassing goal, which is social determinants of health are improved, which includes health, community development, neighborhood support, anti-displacement, emerging needs, economic, and access to opportunity. And this might make more sense if we just dive into one of our logic models to see just how the breakdown. I guess, well, first, do we want to brainstorm additional goals?
You're talking about overarching goals?
Yeah.
I looked at these and I felt like this covered a lot. So I don't know if anyone had anything to add. I can't see anyone's hands, but if you can.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Padilla.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Cody, could you expand on item number 5? Homeownership is sustainable. When you say economic and energy, what do you mean? I understand economics. What do you mean by energy?
Commissioner Padilla, that was my contribution to the sustainability idea, which is that there's lots of kinds of sustainability, but when it comes to home ownership, you want people to be able to afford their continued housing, and home ownership is helpful in that your mortgage payment presumably doesn't change over time. But what if you lose a job? You know, so how do we make sure that we're also supporting foreclosure prevention, refinancing services to make a monthly payment more affordable for somebody who needs it, a reverse mortgage. But then there's also the energy efficiency aspect of homeownership, because energy efficient home is much less expensive to operate over time.
Okay.
So that was kind of where we were, and there's probably many other, you know, maybe it's also expansive with a household's needs, you know, which can include somebody who needs to age in place, needs accessibility retrofits, somebody has another baby and they need resources to add a bedroom onto their house or to convert their garage into, you know, so it's kind of this idea that it's much more affordable in the long term to keep your housing and make it work for your changing needs rather than having to sell a house and buy a new one.
Okay, thank you. You know, I understood the economic, but I think under energy, I wanted to make sure that when you were speaking energy, you were speaking to the, you know, the energy efficiency of those homes, whether it's new construction or renovations, et cetera, that we always look at making it as energy efficient as we can, which then also drives the economic sustainability of the home for the homeowners.
And I think this could also, Commissioner Padilla, include and Chair, the transportation accommodations for, like, say, electrical charging stations or just walkways to bike or and get to work, or bus
Great.
system.
Thank you. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Commissioner Torres. I don't know if this is the right place to bring this up, but Commissioner Watkins kind of talked a little bit about it last time. If we shouldn't be thinking of how to have conversations on a regular basis with the county and also with the state in terms of, you know, planning for the future, identifying other resources, impacting policy. How do we talk to the legislature to make the changes or to suggest changes that might, you know, broaden what the city itself can do? Because, you know, we're not an island. We're part of the county and we're part of the state. And there's things, for instance, that the state doesn't support rent what's it called?
Control.
And so those are things that impact all of this.
So I wonder, just to clarify, so that's a really interesting point. So it's almost as if we need a regional decision-making framework or regional approach to housing affordability. So, which we have a little bit in that, you know, staff talks to each other, but we don't really have a system, right, that regionalizes the approach. So that's interesting. I wonder how we would write that.
I wonder if that's a strategy. What that could be, or an action that would be built into each of the goals, rather than an independent goal, but doesn't.
Say like coordination across governmental agencies or something like that is improved.
Is it an independent goal?
I think it's bigger than that. But.
Yeah.
I think to sort of piggyback on it, it was in the executive summary of the big document, what was it called? Pages and pages from the feds, was that from?
From MFA.
Oh, from MFA, yes. They mentioned also that we should be coordinating, at least communicating with other committees of the city that have anything to do with land use. And they particularly mentioned planning commissions, that planning commissions would really have some sense of what the housing needs are in the area where they're making decisions. And if that's true, I have no idea, because we don't ever have, you know. And, you know, I don't know if that's like a big housing summit once a year, or if that's, I mean, we're volunteers. I mean, you guys know everything. We hear it once a month.
Actually, that's a good point, because I've always wanted to see what understanding what county's working on and how it connects to us. And we don't have that system or any kind of platform to be able to share information. And I think staff does because of relationship. But I don't think it really trickles down to the general public for understanding of like the regional approach to planning and for affordable housing initiatives. So
but also, like, does the planning commission have any idea what we do? Do we have any idea what they do, and is it related at all? I mean, maybe some of you do, but
the planning commission, but
our planning commission, you know, that, or is there anyone else who deals with land use? Any other volunteer groups? Is there any reason for us to coordinate with them on anything? You know, like in the MFA document, the one, it did strike me when they said they should understand what the housing needs are in the area where they're making decisions. And does that make sense?
Yeah,
it
makes a lot of
says,
sense.
yeah. And what is that? Well, that's coordination, right? Maybe it's a big summit once a year, maybe, who knows? I don't know what that looks like or what the goal is.
so we have
Oh, and related was also from the MFA doc, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, was some kind of an education program as a goal to get rid of the resistance, the not in my backyard. You know, I mean, that's become.
written that.
You moved that, yeah. I think that was in the MFA document too, under their goals, I believe. Anyway, that's. Oh, I'm sorry. You know, and I'm just looking at this document and thinking about it, and you know, you guys really do deal with the staff and counselor, you deal with it. And unless you're working in housing, you know, I come here once a month and, you know, get the update on not only here, and I read what's going on around the country, and it's the same thing everywhere. It is the same thing everywhere, and until they, I don't know, you know, fix capitalism or something, I don't know, you know.
Yeah.
But I really would bow to particularly staff, you know, what you're seeing in terms of setting these goals, but with one caveat, which is that when the requirement for affordable units was taken away from rental units, people who were building apartment buildings, you know, that caused a huge mess. And I think I was on the commission, and I think we missed that. Or maybe the council missed that. That's what I understood happened, right?
Well, Madam Chair, if I could answer that, I mean, allowing a fee in lieu of meant that we actually got some market rate development.
Mhm.
Because inclusionary zoning only works when the market
Yeah.
will play. Right.
Yeah,
And so if it's too restrictive,
no, I understand
Right.
why it happened,
Yeah.
but the result was there was no rent, there was no rental units anywhere. No longer.
results of the ordinance.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, and so how do we not miss that in our goals, miss something like that? I think is something we need to try to put somewhere. And now, I guess, if there's something like that, how does this commission miss if that would be an outcome? That they just wouldn't play, or,
Excuse me, Madam Chair, there could be a fiscal impact analysis at certain points.
Well, we have to do that anyway. I think, but to answer that question, the changes to the ordinance, so I wasn't here when the Santa Fe Homes program was implemented or approved in 2005. So I don't know, actually 2008, 2006, somewhere when I wasn't here. So I'm not really sure how that conversation worked, but at the time, development was gangbusters.
Mhm.
And so the requirement on the homeownership side was 30%, which is really high. I've done a lot of research about inclusionary zoning, and there's almost nowhere that has a 30% requirement. You know, we established a 40% requirement for Nava Ade as a condition of annexation, and for Tierra Contenta as a condition of being a planned community. And there are various reasons why it worked on those two projects, but when 2008 hit, you know, that's when the requirement was reduced on the homeownership side. It wasn't reduced on the rental side. And as the market started to come back slightly, the rental developers were saying, we're not building in Santa Fe because we can't.
So I guess in terms of a goal, how do we try to see something like that coming? So we're going to the council and say, hey, you guys, you have to do something about this. It's crazy. You're not going to have any, where does that kind of information help? Where do we put it?
Can I answer part of that? I don't ever feel like we have the data to back up decisions we make, ever. I mean, I would love to see data like this is our housing situation. And it actually break it down into not just units we need, but also like how many people have been displaced. I don't know. I just feel like we don't have that data.
So is that a goal?
And I'm wondering if that's a goal or is it an action? So I guess I'm confused about what we add to this overarching, which is kind of like the vision, right? But then how do we get to that vision? And we have these specific objectives or goals that we want to reach in order to meet that vision or theory of change. So I'm confused about adding to this because these are kind of overarching goals versus the things we need to do to make sure that this happens. And that's like, collaboration, data, access to data. So, Mr. Torres, go ahead.
I think something that might need to be in here is remember that resolution, or what was it called, the document that Chainbreaker played a part in developing, that housing is a human right, and that was presented to the city council, and the council accepted that as something, as a value for the city. And so, it seems that if we really want to, going along with what you're saying, capitalism isn't going to change tomorrow, but if we look at, this is a value that we want to adhere by or really work on, we really need to go back to that document, because the city council did work on it and said, yes, we agree with this. The pillars of, developing housing. Remember that? I don't remember what it was called, but
the housing, the Bill of Rights.
Yes, the housing Bill of Rights.
And
I think it was the Residence Bill of Rights.
Yes, the Residence
covered
Bill of
a lot of.
And I think that needs to be part of this, because Otherwise, it's again, one of those things that gets forgotten. It gets, you know, and it goes along with creating the data to support. Okay, so we said we would do this way back when we did. And where are we at now? You know, and one of the comments that I had written on this under the building home ownership is, do we really know what the rate of ownership in the city for low and moderate income and racial and ethnically diverse households really is? But also we don't talk about disability, persons with disability, and nor do we talk about our Native American community.
So, Commissioner Torres, those are all really good points, and that will be brought out in the housing needs analysis. So part of this plan is based on taking and that was another reason we were sort of a little slow to get this rolling, is that the latest census projections based on the 2020 data will be available in December. So our consultant was like, well, this is gonna be a really good time to start this once we have those data sets, because it looks exactly at that. By income range, by demographic category, by housing need. So you'll have a lot more.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Hughes.
So what's before us, staff wants our input on our reaction to what you've started with this document. Is that correct?
That is
so
correct.
This is not Chain Breakers document. We're looking at you started here.
Correct.
We have to be sent to HUD by early next year.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Commissioner Hughes, what we're looking at is based on our assumed inputs, which is, we know approximately how much money we're going to have. We know the limitations of the funding sources. We know our staff capacity. We understand, you know, we have some assumed inputs. So given those inputs, what can we do to accomplish these goals?
I really think you guys did a really good job so far in laying this out. My community would be better if those are great, really well. Right now, like this, and then you start to flesh them out with strategies, actions, outputs, and outcomes. I don't see outcomes aren't there yet because you need the numbers right. But it's really nicely laid out, so I think I will be happy. So number 6, you haven't started on, is that correct? Or?
We got tired.
Okay.
No. Commissioner Hughes, we got to number 6 and we thought that this one kind of had the most creativity baked into it, because it's also I think in our last consolidated plan, we had an emerging need goal that was sort of the kitchen sink goal. And so we elaborated a little bit to really bring the language in line with what our community services folks are doing, what the emergency services folks are doing, like really looking at, we know that even if you have great emergency services, you're not ending homeless. You might be saving lives every night when you go out, but you're not ending homelessness. And so this is kind of that area where we're trying to connect some of those dots across. And maybe this is where sort of that regionalizing and coordinating framework comes into play. Yeah.
Might you be able to flesh this out a little bit so we can revisit this at December 7th?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, because we'll start to provide drafts of the consolidated plan sections to you all starting probably in January, and certainly by February. So we'll start to get to
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Padilla.
Madam Chair, yeah, thank you. I don't know if you can see there are members of the public on the Zoom call. Member of the public, Kim Shanahan, has stated in a chat that when we were talking about connections to county, et cetera, he states that the Santa Fe Housing Action Coalition can act as a bridge between city, county, and state and their sub-entities. Just wanted to make sure that the public's comment got out there for us to take a look at.
Thank you, Commissioner Padilla. Yeah, we can't really see those, and neither can the public if it's recorded. So it's good that you read it out loud. I think that the Housing Action Coalition is a resource. It just, I don't think it's connecting all the players still. And maybe that's their goal to eventually get there, but I don't feel like it's telling you what's happening at the county level or at the state, and then how it's all connected, or how it can inform each other to do a better job with, you know, our housing policies. So I still think there's a way we need to like better inform ourselves regionally, and also like state and federal, how it's all connected and how, like what's the end goal, or like what's the regional perspective to be able to make housing more affordable? Because I don't, you're seeing development right at the county, and it's not necessarily connected to anything that's happening below it that's in the city, and in terms of infrastructure, not, and sometimes it works out, but I think most of the time it doesn't. So that's hard. I just want to follow back up with the Residents' Bill of Rights. So that's not a chain breaker document. It's actually a city resolution that was passed. And there's actually points in there that wouldn't be here, but it could be potentially, because I don't remember some of the things that it listed as to recommendations of supporting housing or making it more affordable. And those could probably fit into some of these categories, but I don't know what they are. I don't have it on hand that I can get them for the document. So,
and I do want to clarify, Madam Chair, that the Bill of Rights is a chain breaker document. The resolution adopted the Bill of Rights as a guiding policy document. So it's not a city produced document.
Right, but it is a resolution that lists certain goals.
The resolution identifies
and I think
the
those
goals
are the
as policy.
That to put in here. I don't have them on hand. They actually might be applicable to some of the things that were already in here, but I don't remember exactly
What I was trying to say is that we need to revisit with that to ensure that that resolution has that it's shown in the plan. You know, the parts of it that can be fitted in here. That's the point.
in these different categories.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like we could look at that and see what's missing that could be more explicit. Just some of that on my fingertips. How else do you want to inform, like, get feedback from folks? Because
I have another question.
Sure, Commissioner Hughes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I noticed that this is from MFA, this document, this diagram here. Is that right? Number 3 is manufactured homes. You know, we have thousands of people living in manufactured homes in MFA, mostly in city limits too. I think that needs to be addressed specifically someplace in here. And what can we do to help people overcome the popularity, shall we say, in the corporate community, buying them up and charging people 10% more a year on the ground rent? It's outrageous. So what can the city do to be somewhat proactive to help?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Hughes, the city has already outlawed the creation of new mobile home parks, which is that model you're talking about, where there's one owner who controls the land and sometimes the renters own the mobile home, which really makes them a captive audience because it's super expensive to try to move it. And sometimes the owner owns both the land and the mobile home. So the city doesn't allow that kind of development anymore, which was a pretty big move. But there are existing mobile home parks that still operate under that model.
I mean, Cottonwood must be 500 units, so it's huge.
There's probably more than that. Like,
Is there more than people?
so yeah.
Yeah. And Madam Chair, Commissioners, the Habitat's home repair program, they work with a lot of mobile homeowners. They've replaced a lot of floors, a lot of roofs, they've improved, they've built accessible ramps, they've helped with drainage issues. They have done a lot of work with some of those homes.
The word out on the street is that some of those places have been bought by outside entities that are thinking about really selling out, and all those people would have to move, but move where? And so there's a lot of concern about people living in these areas. What are we gonna do? And not even knowing who to talk with, or, you know, how to plan for the future and anything. So I had written a circle and said very vulnerable in the current market, because, you know, for an owner from California, they can throw everybody out and decide to build fancy, you know, things in that land, and then what? The placement is like really.
Yeah, so Madam Chair, that would be a housing preservation strategy. So we will definitely put that in there. Years and years ago, the Housing Trust helped, there was a mobile home park located kind of near the Santa Fe Place Mall, and the Santa Fe Place Mall was expanding, and they were doing exactly that. They owned the land, they were kicking everyone out, and the Housing Trust raised money to move, to buy a piece of land and to have everyone's mobile homes move.
Wow.
And I'm trying, now I'm totally forgetting the name of it, but you know, it took that kind of effort, which was pretty huge to make it work. And then they helped everyone buy, if they didn't already own the mobile home, they set it up as a home ownership model so that they bought their lot, as well as the home itself.
Did the city have anything to do with that?
That's a really good question. I want to say that the city did maybe use, the name of it's on the tip of my tongue and I can't remember it, but I do think the city supported it possibly through CDBG. Yeah, but not not a huge amount.
No, but for it to not happen in a vacuum.
Right.
Without, it's a great home preservation strategy.
Yeah, no, that I think
So
that's
that under
one.
sustainable home ownership?
Or it could be housing stability. There's a lot of that covers both renters and homeowners. Yeah. That's kind of where we have the preservation as a strategy.
I think this is going to become a bigger issue. I've actually gotten complaints from folks saying, what is the city going to do about this mobile home park that's being sold, and people that don't know exactly if they'll be able to stay and have their mobile home stay on that property, and I think it's going to become a bigger issue. So I don't know, how do we write that explicitly?
I'm sure you're talking about a specific instance or everything, you know, about.
Yes, and I don't really know what to do about it, because I feel like the city is kind of.
If it's private land and the city doesn't have a rule outlawing it, there's not a lot. I think in this particular situation, the Housing Trust was willing to step up and negotiate with the private landowner and take the lead on it.
The strategy to put in is to figure out how to help the residents own the property and make it a co-op.
Yeah.
And what role can the city do to effectuate that?
Okay, so then how do you write that? Where would that go?
Stability.
Yeah.
You all have, just want to make sure it's documented.
Yeah, I can add that now.
Okay.
Well, it could be co-op, but it could also be community land trust.
That's right. I think you're right. That's even better. Yeah.
Which then brings me to thinking that we need to really put in this, the use of the community land trust as part of the plan, so that then we could also use CDBG money for it, like Jason explained last time. But I'm wondering if there isn't something that we need to be talking with HUD about. You know, 600,000 isn't really, you know, enough for the current inflation and, you know, all of the things that are happening in the market. And I know that's a whole other ball of wax, but 600,000 doesn't cut it for a city with the kind of money issues as we have.
Yeah, unfortunately, the HUD funding formula doesn't take that into account. It's like, looks at, yeah.
Well, can we
Anyway.
talk with our congresspersons and, you know, go that route, you know, and,
Well, I want to recognize too that the governing body took a major step in establishing a funding level for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. We'll see. So that's a place where we should write that in here
yeah.
to ensure that that funding commitment is sustained.
And
Through our budgeting process.
increases, you know, from year to year or from every 2 years or whenever.
Or takes into account
Right.
some of those factors.
Yeah.
Do we have that somewhere in there? Because I think it's a couple of things like committing to an annual funding source of, I don't know what XYZ, but also thinking about other revenue sources to put into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Because right now, just putting it from general fund, I don't think is sustainable, given the fact that we had a crisis and when the DRT goes down, then everything else is limited. So
Well,
I don't know where we need to put that, but just looking at like finding other funding, reliable funding sources, revenue sources.
That could probably go under a few different housing stability for all and social
I mean,
determinants.
it really could go in for all of them.
Yeah.
To ensure the security of funding sources and the expansion as applicable relative to community needs.
So could you go back to the goal statement and just add it under strategies to seek alternate forms of funding?
Susan, what page is that?
It's the first page of the color. Or put it down the line. It's just.
Like the goal statement or?
Yeah, under the goal statement, it has examples of broadly applied programming, funding, and technical assistance to inform the actions, and then you can add and seek alternate funding streams that are less volatile.
Alternate and permanent.
Yeah.
Permanent housing, permanent funding stream. Would there be a place on this document for looking at not only, you know, what we get from HUD, but I'm just perplexed by the affordable housing, the LEHI, what is it, what's the acronym? Low income housing tax credit. It's very competitive and there's a very small pot of money. And I've always wondered why they made that just so difficult to access. And I don't know why the federal government doesn't increase that pot of money. It's like that to me is something that we need to talk to our Congress delegates, because that's like the ongoing thing. It's like the thing that helps fund multifamily the apartments or multifamily housing, and we never have this like option because it's so competitive and there's a very small amount of money. So I don't know if that comes from the state because it's funneled through MFA, right? But then that funding comes through the federal, right?
It comes from the Treasury Department and it's allocated to states based on several factors: population, income levels. And I don't know the funding formula, but it is also a funding formula. And then MFA puts its own funding formula on it. So they have the qualified allocation plan. So they're setting priorities. So some years they've set priorities for rental housing. Some years they've set priorities for rehab. So for new construction or rehab. And so the developers in the field have to respond to those priorities and try to make their application score the highest based on the priorities. So it's really hard. And then sometimes MFA will say, and we need geographic distribution, and Santa Fe got 2 projects last year, so we're not going to give them any this year regardless. So yeah, so
Madam Chair, what's the program that MFA has? I just got something in the mail. I did it last year. You start at least $500 and you get it off your taxes, your state income tax. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, I remember something to that effect.
So that should be advertised more for people who want to do something.
Right.
It's in their interest
donate,
too.
right? To donate to that.
Yep.
To that fund.
It's like it's
Yeah, it's a tax
whatever you get
credit
it off your
for a
taxes.
donation, right? And it's very underused.
Right.
So.
Well, that could be a goal. You know,
That's
like,
a strategy.
well, yeah, but a goal to put it in, you know, to work on it. You know, it's
So where do we put all this stuff about other funding sources, whether it's like,
I added it as a strategy to every goal,
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it is.
but I could
Part of
reword it
every
if you'd like, and just put commitment of annual funding source and consideration of other revenue sources into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund.
Yeah. It's definitely not a goal, but it's feeds into a lot of them.
and what do we do about like low income housing tax credit?
I think, I mean,
That's,
that's
yeah.
like an advocacy thing and calling your Congress people, and while you're at it, advocate for bigger appropriations for CDBG as well. I don't think they appropriate that much more money every year, and New Mexico has a new entitlement community, and all these cities are, the populations are growing, so that bucket's just gonna get smaller and smaller. Our entitlement award will probably diminish over time.
Which is the new entitlement community?
Farmington,
Oh,
Oh, really?
they weren't.
They lost half their population. How's that happen?
I think that someone described it to me that it could be like the center, so it's like Farmington, Aztec, Bloomfield, probably.
Metro area.
Yeah, exactly.
Still.
I mean, this isn't a, it's not to be added here, but I mean, we're hamstrung, because really the way to be effective with the federal government right now is for the Association of Counties and the Association of, you know, city councils and school boards and everyone else. They come together and say, hey, come on. We're all going through this all across the country. This isn't by any stretch just us. It's like, come on. And if we could go to Ben Ray, he's gonna be in agreement with us. Vanessa Ledger, she's gonna be in agreement with us. You know, it's like, they need some institutional support that comes from the elected people, united elected people.
Yeah. You know, I think the other thing to tie it into is, for instance, our teachers need to be able to stay here.
Mhm.
Our, you know, EMS personnel, police, you know, all of these first responders. And that is all affected by having or not having housing available that's affordable to them. To anyone, but in those categories as well. So something has to be, in thinking of working with the school district and, you know, county and state, it tie it all together, not each group fighting their own battle, but, you know, we're all in this together.
That's not something I agree that could come out of this document, but it's, you know, we're all hamstrung.
Mhm.
Just looking at folks on the Zoom, were there any other additions or questions you had about the document? I mean, if there's anything else we need to add?
Okay, so
Hold on. Commissioner Padilla, do you have your hand up?
Madam Chair, I'll make a comment. I thought the information that was provided, the way it was outlined, the points that were made in the information that was presented was very thorough. I mean, there were some minor items that need to be added, but I thought it was very informative and I think a good start. And I thank staff for their work on this.
You know,
Commissioner Flores, did you have a question?
what I had thought of,
Okay, go ahead, and then we'll get to Commissioner Marquez after.
okay. So there was two places that I had thought of open spaces, like parks, under the social determinants of health. And parks that really meet the needs of the particular community where it's going to be located, in terms of multi-generational disability, you know, things for people of all different ages and levels to be able to not only access it, but be able to do things that promote their well-being in those open spaces. And then also the other place where I thought it
Would that include connections to trail systems?
to trail systems, to transportation, mobility access, you know, all of that. But there was another place where I could, oh, the other thing that I think that we need to look at in terms of social determinants is any polluting industries near communities that are being expanded. For instance, in the south side, we have the asbestos plant. We also have, that we still don't know what's left over across the street from the old McDonald's on Airport Road that was Lano, you know. And any other industrial sites around the neighborhoods that could be polluting water, land, you know, air. Because we really, I think we need to be aware of where we're building in relation to these sources of pollution.
So with that, how would you say that for the strategy?
And I also feel like your last point, I didn't fully capture that here, but access to open spaces, parks, transportation.
Mobility concerns for persons like with disabilities or older persons, that, you know, there has to be awareness of bumps, you know, or levels that are not even, and, you know, all kinds of things like that.
Mobility, accessibility?
Yeah, accessibility. And transportation, to be able to get to these resources and be able to use them.
I have a question.
Marcus.
Oh, Commissioner Marcus, yes.
Oh, no, you're right.
I think it just what it was I was going to say about the traffic flow, the safety roads, the.
We can't hear you.
You can hear me?
Try again. It just got cut out a little bit.
Okay. I was saying that I was going to talk about that, the traffic flow, the safety of the roads, the spaces to circulate through the city and in the neighborhoods, like in the mobile homes, not only the land that they're using and the risk that is that they are going to be displaced, but also the services that are getting into the mobile home parks, like traffic lights, all those things that belong to the city included, like we can do some kind of audit to see if it's safe, the entering and exiting from the mobile home parks. That's something that is a service that the city provides. And yeah, mostly the traffic and the open space, leaving some open space for the neighborhoods, or don't crowd so much some areas that are already crowded, because that it's very risky for safety, like how services, emergency services are going to get in a place like here in El Camino Real when it takes 20 from Airport Road. It's for emergency services to go through the traffic. So we need open spaces and plan. If there's already constructions, we can plan the flow of the traffic in some areas.
So like infrastructure improvements for safety and well-being, maybe? Does that capture that? We did get the open space piece above, but does that capture that, Commissioner Marquez?
Yeah.
Madam
It was
Chair.
about the mobility concerns too, but that's fine.
Thank you, Commissioner Marquez. Did you have any other additions or questions on the document?
Oh, I think it's very complete. I was looking through the different strategies, and it has these strategies that are open maybe to do some modifications if needed, but it has many of the problems that we are living for housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Marquez. I'm going to go to Commissioner Lopez and then back to Commissioner Padilla.
I just wanted to say, I don't have any language for this, but I really like that we're able to recommend funding for things like Adelante, all of those things that just save people's lives, and however that fits in here.
Yeah.
I want that in here.
Like supporting service providers.
Yeah.
And what do we call her?
Yeah, the social services network.
Commissioner Padilla, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Member of the public has their hand raised, Kim Shanahan. I don't know if you want to recognize him for a comment.
Just making sure we get input from the commission first.
Okay, I just want to make sure that you know that we do have a hand raised.
This is not a public meeting.
Okay, thank you.
I didn't think it was a public meeting. Let me make sure.
It's not, well, it's a public meeting, but it's.
I mean,
up
it's
to
a
you
public
to-
hearing. Is what I mean.
Yeah, it's not a public hearing, but it is up to you. You can-
So let's wait till we get all of our input, and then we could get any. I think there was 2 community members on Zoom. But let me just add some things here. If there's no other. So I was just curious about how we would explicitly state. Or maybe I missed it, but how we have eviction and foreclosure prevention. Did we have that in there somewhere?
Yeah, it should be under
I know foreclosure prevention was under, but I didn't see.
sustainable.
Did I see eviction or housing stability?
Right.
Housing, yeah.
There it is, outputs number D.
What number was that?
On housing stability too, on output.
Housing stability from.
Okay, so we do, all right, sorry, I missed that one. And then if we were to potentially use the Affordable Housing Trust Fund as matching funds for a community land trust model, do we need to explicitly say that in this?
Madam
Utilize-
Chair, we can only use the trust funds to support the actual cost of housing. So if the participants in the land trust model, the future homeowners or renters could get assistance through Affordable Housing Trust Fund, but we couldn't use trust funds to help with the technical assistance or to set up the trust fund or the land trust or to run it or any of that.
So when they were giving us a presentation, there was local funding sources. And so I can't remember how they utilized them. Do you all remember? They did get funding sources from the, local jurisdictions, but.
Madam Chair, I believe they use the local sources to do feasibility studies, to build the capacity of an organization to run the land trust, because that's the big stumbling block, right? It's not a governmental entity. It needs to be a community driven process. And so you have to create a capacity to do the work and to manage the long-term asset. And so I think they would use local funds to help set that up. And I believe Sawmill got money from the city of Albuquerque to set themselves up.
So do we need to say
Maybe
that
even
somewhere?
ongoing operating?
Just
We
because
can't
it's new.
use our funds. We
Uh-huh.
can't use our housing funds for that. That could be an initiative of the governing body that came through general funds.
So we can't use Affordable Housing Trust Fund funds or the CDBG funds for, it would only be able to be used for, feasibility study or capacity building?
No. Madam Chair, Affordable Housing Trust Funds could be used for a feasibility study for the actual housing development
Uh-huh.
or the soft costs for housing development. Community development funds I think that a land trust, like the capacity building funds, would go under the social services, public services, and then it would be subject to the cap. So it's really going to have to come from the general fund.
Okay. And then,
No, I'm thinking the sawmill was like 1 million for that setup. Should double check.
from the city of Albuquerque.
I can double check.
Okay, that'd be great. Well, I would love to have a presentation by them, just because to understand.
The sawmill.
Yeah, people from Sawmill, just to, like lessons learned, like how they ended up starting it, what worked then, and how are they now moving into the next phases of the original model.
Best person would be Debbie O'Malley, who was their first executive director, and now stepping down from the county commission.
Oh, she is stepping down?
She's term limited.
Oh, okay. Okay. So is there somewhere in here about a strategy to utilize city-owned land for affordable housing? Whether it's through donation,
but that's
or...
a big, huge gap. We should definitely put that in here. I think that's a strategy that probably be added to all of them.
A good point.
So I don't know the best way to add that in, but I just think we should prioritize city-owned land that is developable, not all our land is developable.
In a similar vein, it'd be good to try to figure out what can we do to entice private landowners to provide affordable housing. What can the city offer them, as was done with the Midtown rezoning in 2015, was it 2016? Not Midtown, was it St. Michael corridor?
The link, which hasn't been used yet.
There is that.
So yeah, I guess that's two different points. One is this, prioritizing city-owned land and for affordable housing initiatives, whether that's donating it or offering incentives, I don't know. And then the other piece is incentivizing private developers to what were you?
Whatever it takes.
Yeah.
Hardware be used for affordable housing. The car dealer, Carlos Ray Cereals.
Well, and you had talked about Kmart several moves back. Yeah.
And the parking lot is triple the size of the building.
Did we capture that? We're good. Cody?
Yes.
And then I guess I'm just curious, is there any place in here about how we can incentivize or require, I don't know which way to go with that, a voucher acceptance? Because not all landlords accept them. And there's some cities that actually require them. And I don't know if it's a percentage but is there a way that we can like incentivize use of vouchers?
Section 8.
What's that?
Section 8 vouchers.
Well, I think, Madam Chair, I think that's an ordinance amendment. And I think I have to check, but I think in our fair housing section, I think we have language about prohibiting income source discrimination. And that's what a voucher usually falls under, because what the basis for which vouchers are usually rejected. Sometimes it's just out now. Discrimination. I don't want those people living in my unit. But a lot of times on the corporate landlords, because they're much more savvy, they're going to say your income. So somebody who qualifies for a voucher has a lower income. Right. And the property owner can say, based on your actual income, you can't afford this unit. And the renter says, but I have a voucher to cover the difference between what I can afford and the cost of your unit. And they say, but your income doesn't qualify. So that's what we mean when we talk about prohibiting discrimination based on income source, because this person is saying, I'm supplementing my income with this voucher, and the landlord is saying, but I'm using your absolute income, and that's not. So that's kind of, and I think, and I'll double check, and if we don't have it in there, we talked about doing it the next time we did a round of revisions, that it is in our fair housing. It is certainly written into the section we added to try to incentivize private market developers of rental housing to include the rent restrictions, and we said that they couldn't discriminate based on income source. They had to accept vouchers. So we do have it written into that piece of the code.
I guess I feel like there's ways around it, and how do we make sure that folks aren't being discriminated, but it would be in the form of like saying, well, you can't afford this unit, but the actually places have to accept a certain number of vouchers. I don't know if that's how to write that in, if that's like a policy thing that's not.
Well, I don't think, I would say we could negotiate that when we own the land. Because we can say, you get this land and here are all the rules that apply to this parcel. I don't think it's a good blanket. It's because it's kind of unenforceable, and that's always a bad policy direction, is something you can't actually enforce. Like, it's much better to make sure it has teeth when you are controlling the asset, and you can make that a condition of making it available.
I guess I want to think more about how that is, because we have short-term rental prohibitions and we don't enforce that well. It's based on like people complaining, it's reactionary. So I wouldn't want that to be that way too, but I'm just trying to figure out a way to get more people to accept vouchers.
Well, I think to Commissioner Hughes's point, how do we incentivize it? Other communities have done things like, if you accept a voucher tenant, we will build a tiny house, guest house, and put it in your backyard if you will rent it to a voucher tenant for 10 years. And then it's yours. And you can do whatever you want with it after the certain amount of time. So
Great idea.
yeah, there's, I think Portland somewhere is doing something like that. Or, other places will waive property taxes.
But how do they control that? How do they regulate that? What you just described, that scenario?
I have no idea. I assume they have an army of code enforcement officers who are checking leases every year and making sure it's happening.
I think that the twist to that, to make it where then those people after 10 years don't become homeless or can't find another place to live, is to, in that time frame, to be helping them become able to buy their own home. Somehow tie it to helping them clean up their credit, or start an account to where they can start putting down a down payment, things like that, so that if the time comes when they need to move out of there, now they won't become homeless. They have a way to go. They could move out in 3 years to their own home, or in 5 years, or whatever it takes, but something built into that so that the next step would be permanent housing for them.
Right now, we don't even have that model at all.
Madam Chair, may I ask a question about that comment? Is the suggestion for the developer to put that program together so that permanent housing is a end product of 10 years, or is that incumbent upon the city or HomeWise or somebody to work with that individual to make sure that at the end of 10 years, that individual is ready to seek or to acquire permanent housing?
It would be a third party.
And it doesn't be 10 years, it can be whatever number of years.
But I guess to answer your question, Commissioner Padilla is not the developer to facilitate that, but the program itself, we have to figure out how it would. We don't even have anything like this, but yeah, the end goal would be to make sure that they are able to live.
Research cities like Vancouver have done that well. See what's applicable.
Yeah, and I'm sure one way to control it too. So my biggest control over private sector home ownership developers to ensure that they're delivering income qualified housing is that the city requires them to work with HomeWise or the Housing Trust. And the city also has a contract with HomeWise and the Housing Trust to make sure they're working with the developers and that they're fulfilling all of the administrative pieces to that, and we pay them to do it. So there's no unfunded mandate. There's no like, no, you'll just contribute all your staff on a voluntary basis. You know, so there's, I think, and that model works really, really well for us. And the developers are happy because they don't have to worry about it. They just build the house and they turn it over, and somebody else manages all of the getting that mortgage ready buyer and just handing it to them, and then they're done. So we could certainly that model, and we're hoping that with these first two projects that are going to have rent restricted units that will pilot that kind of nonprofit for-profit relationship with the city, probably paying the administrative costs of managing those units for the private market developer whose property management team is not going to know how to do an income certification, nor should they. That's not what they do. So we'll help with that piece.
Thank you. That's good. So do we need to explicitly state that? I guess I'm trying to figure out where.
Don't worry about where, just come up with the ideas. Okay. We'll fit it all into the framework, and then we have these smart consultants who will help us if we have any floating ideas that we're kind of like, I don't know how this fits in. We'll get it all. We just need to capture it today. So yeah.
Is your point captured? I mean, part of something that I'm still trying to figure out and curious about is like increasing the amount of time units are kept affordable. Like right now, the way it's stated in I don't know which document, is it our homes program or in the ordinance of the chapter 14 where it says only 10 years that they have to keep a unit affordable?
Or a market rate rent restriction.
That's how we do it in Oregon. Is that what you're saying?
No, we wrote, so the compliance period for subsidy is always time limited. And the reason, even on 100%, like Siler Yard has a limited affordability period. And the reason why is that an infinite affordability period actually just pretty much removes all of the market value from the property. And so at the end of the compliance period, you want, first of all, the banks don't like it because they're like, oh, if you default, your property's not worth anything because it's supposed to be affordable forever. You know, nobody can earn enough money to pay me back. So it also gives the property owner, so someone like Interfaith, they will likely refinance their property at the end of the compliance period and then keep it affordable. But if it doesn't have an end of the compliance period, it doesn't have enough market value to refinance it, to capitalize the resource. So that's why all of the affordability programs have a compliance period. For the for-profit developers, you know, we looked at several periods of time. We felt like 10 years was a good starting point. And we felt like if after 5 years, we see that it's actually pretty easy for them to do this, then we can do an ordinance amendment to increase that. But what we didn't want to do is to make it like, oh, and just like a tax credit developer who, by the way, has gotten millions of dollars of subsidy, you're going to have to do this for 30 years. So we wanted to make it enticing enough so that they would say, all right, I'm going to give it a shot because 10 years, I can manage that loss. I can project that over 10 years and I can make that work. But it's after that time frame, it's a little uncertain. And so that was the idea behind that 10-year time frame. If we were working with 100% subsidized project and it was city-owned land, or we were putting a bunch of subsidy in it, we would never go with 10 years because that developer owner could have access to, first of all, they're not going to have the same kind of debt. So they don't have to make as much money off the units. So it's much more sustainable for them to do that. But with a market rate developer, we wanted to make it enticing enough for them to try. As opposed to like scaring them off and everybody's.
I guess I'd like to hear Commissioner Padilla's perspective on that. And just so you know, just so we all know what project did you say? Daniel's project? Siler Yard. That's a, what is it, 50? What is the time frame for that?
40 or 45
years to stay affordability, but that's 100%.
100%.
I mean, that's not 100% affordable though, the project itself. I thought.
Siler Yard?
Yeah.
Yes, it
I
is.
thought it was multi.
It's multi-levels within a 65% area median income and below.
So that's why that one.
So they have 30% units and 45% units and 65%.
I guess I'd just like to hear from Commissioner Padilla about that, because 10 years to me does not seem like a long enough time for somebody to be able to stay in a affordable unit and to get established. And I guess I wish it would like revert back to affordability for someone else if someone were to have to move out. But
Within that 10-year period, they have to rent it to another income qualified buyer, the renter.
Commissioner Padilla, did you have any?
Yeah,
thoughts on that?
yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And Alex, if I understood your last comment there, is that after a period of 10 years, they must rent it to another qualified buyer, not it becomes a market rate unit. Did I understand that correctly?
No.
No, Commissioner Padilla, for the market rate rental projects for which the inclusionary zoning requirement has never been implemented, because it shut down development. And then when we created the fee in lieu of option, everybody jumped at that, of course.
Correct.
Then we changed the rules to make it more flexible. We're not serving the super high need renter here. We're serving the workforce renter who
Correct.
can't afford what's in the marketplace, but they're decent incomes. You know, they're up to 80% of the area median income. So the if a unit turns over within the 10-year period, they have to rent to another income qualified renter.
Okay.
The expectation is these renters are going to have some mobility. Maybe they're trying out a new job in Santa Fe. Maybe they're, they're going to be kind of in the kind of jobs where they probably have some economic mobility. So
Correct.
After the 10-year restriction, then those units can convert to market rate. You have to have a tenant relocation plan approved by the city. So for some of their tenants, probably moving on to market rate rental won't be that big of a deal. For others, they will need much more assistance and better kind of transition into a different, and it gives them time to get on a waiting list. You know, if you have 10 years to be on a waiting list, you probably have a better chance of getting the housing you need versus not having that 10 years.
Correct. So I think I feel that the important part of that program would be that third party assistance to work, to be proactive and work with that renter, work with the developer, with that renter, to make sure that that renter is working towards items such as cleaning up their credit, getting purchase ready, understanding what it takes to become a home owner. I think it's important. I feel that it's important that third party be available, that an active program be set up to turn those individuals into home buyers. Now, realizing that all renters do not necessarily want to be homeowners. They could be looking at, their 10-year plan, and it's to get to a certain level and then to move on. So I think the important thing is going to be to make sure that there is that third party available to assist that individual to the next step in his or her career or their career, as they look at not only their work life balance, but also their home ownership balance. I mean, they may not want to be homeowners. Not everybody wants to be a homeowner.
I guess Commissioner Padilla was more on the lines of, do you think that's fair that a developer only has to wait 10 years for their affordable units to stay affordable, and then after 10 years they go back to market rate?
Yeah, I think, yeah, and I'm sorry, I did not answer that question because I definitely have an opinion on that. I really think that it's fair to the developer to have that individual commit to 10 years. That is a significant burden. Just building one unit one unit is a struggle, but when you have multiple units and you're looking at hundreds of units, that's a big commitment for a developer, and there's a significant risk that's there for them. So I think the 10-year is a fair term for the affordable unit. I think what we ought to do is maybe ask some of our developers that, Titan and others that have come through the program and see what their inputs are. But I feel that 10 years is a fair commitment from a developer. To ask more than that could dissuade them from wanting to be getting involved in the program or a program.
Thanks, Commissioner Padilla. And I think Commissioner Marquez had a comment or reaction to that as well.
Yeah, I understand that not everybody wants to be a homeowner. The problem with this is that the people that depends on continue renting, it's continue getting the rents, and it's continue depending on the funds that we are trying to give to the people who needs the most. So they continue into this market of the subsidy, and that's a continuous problem.
By staying on the subsidy, or you're saying not being able to rely on the subsidy after 10 years? You cut out just a little bit, Commissioner Marquez, that's why I'm asking again.
No, I think it's more regarding, there has to be a goal to be point. Because if they don't buy a house, they continue using these funds that are very short. It's very little amount compared with the need. And if they don't have a long-term goal to be independent, have their own property, they continue using these funds that are very little. And I think, I know that not everybody has the same goals, but it reduces the possibility to solve the housing situation that we already have that is very complicated.
Good point.
Yes.
Thank you. Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. That to move people from that subsidized position, the social benefits of like trails and libraries and having health centers nearby will push those families forward out of a subsidized situation. It also helps, like I said, to have schools close by, to have the resources for education and higher paying jobs.
Yeah.
So again, economic opportunities, not even higher paying, just if people can have multiple jobs close by. Some people choose to have two jobs or more. But Suriname, the model of Suriname actually has Suriname has no, I'm sorry. It's an affordable housing model in Albuquerque anyway, and I think there might be movements out here, but they have case workers at their apartment complexes. They subsidize they don't subsidize, they pay for the units for 2 years, and they completely furnish them, and then through their caseworkers push their residents to go to school, to develop a plan for themselves, because the subsidized housing is cut off after 2 years. And I think they have a 70 to 80% success rate of removing these individuals from homelessness. But they also they do drug testing. They create a complete community for their inhabitants. They have like game nights, and that's a social impetus to reform your, especially if you're having drug problems or violence problems. They have that counseling. So that's a little expansive, I think, for a city to undertake, but maybe through their partners, subsidize your partners if there's someone that
So
wants
is there a way to capture that as like a model for like integrated
I have a
support, or
that just, I mean, not only do you incentivize the developer, but you incentivize the renters. You know, you get this unit if you sign up with HomeWise and take their, you know, I mean, I wouldn't see that as, if you don't want to buy, well, then this isn't a place for you to be. I mean, I know that sounds.
Well, it's not really about just moving out of a rental situation into home ownership. You know, some people really do like to not have the burden of owning a home, but to be in a rental situation and then in 10 years, you're like, okay, well, now you don't qualify. So then what are the next paths for them?
I mean, it's two different populations, the one that never wants to rent and the one that really does want to own. I mean, that only wants to rent and the one that wants to own eventually.
I mean, I like to rent.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't know how to fix things, so I'm happy that way. But
I'm sure Marcus was laughing. Did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think there are groups of people that realistically will not move out of rental situations, for instance, elderly. And they're gonna need subsidized housing. Also persons with disabilities, because they are in a unit or a place that has accommodated their needs, physical needs or emotional, mental health needs. So we need to really be careful with how we word that so that certain groups of people are not put at risk by these definitions, or, you know, maybe for single people or certain types of families that could work, but not for other groups of people. Like maybe single moms with kids, or I don't know, but we need to think about that.
Centers for the renter, excuse me, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'm sorry. I would just jump in, I'm sorry. Can I?
Yes.
Okay.
Please.
I mean, the incentives could be different incentives for the renter, including this, you stay in this unit for 10 years until you get into seniors housing, because the waiting list is 7 years, 8 years, whatever the waiting list is, or is there's government, or you get into some kind of subsidized housing for people with accessibility issues. But it seems like I would like to have something on both sides. I like that a lot, you know, because then that's a better incentive for everyone. And no, you don't, I don't want them thrown out after 10 years. I get what you're saying. Absolutely. Yeah, there aren't. The options are there, but you know, for someone who never even thought that they could ever possibly own a house, to say, well, look, you live here and you work at home, you know, you sort of carve out a path for them. I think that that's a really helpful thing for some people. And also, or, you know, you could stay in this house until you can get into senior housing. There's something that some incentives like that on the renter side, I think I would like to see.
I'm just not sure who facilitates that on the renter side, unless it's, yeah, I just keep thinking about developments that we passed that only have a 10-year frame, and I'm like, who's going to be brought in to support the folks that are, you know, have to think 10 years from now. But I have other thoughts, but I will just leave just one thing and just make sure we have, do we have landlord tenant hotline / resources on here
as a strategy? Yeah, I think it's a housing stability strategy.
I mean, that could be, sorry, Madam Chair, but that could also be a role that the county is undertaking. It's to provide that guidance to affordable home people that are benefiting from those affordable homes. Like, do they have the resources to steer people to, you know, to community health care, for instance?
I just think it needs to be like institutionalized instead of just these things floating around that people don't necessarily know they have access to. So did we get the other piece here? The landlord tenant hotline services support?
Yeah, I put it in.
Okay. All right. Well, I think I'm done. We have 20 minutes before we finish. We have other items on the agenda, and I'm just wondering, because our guest, Kim Shanahan, who's in Costa Rica right now, if you wanted to just share, for about 5 minutes, if you had any, like, I didn't know if you had questions or if you wanted to add to the mix of like.
Yeah.
things that are-
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. There's 2 points I'd like to make. One, I'd like to go back to the Housing Action Coalition. And Madam Chair, I heard your comments. I do want to just put out there, though, that in the absence of any formalized process between the city and the county, it's about the best thing that we've got. Alexandra is on that group. Joseph Montoya is part of that group. The housing development nonprofits, Lofton, Werawath, and Kurt Cron from Habitat are part of it, as are the Home Builders Association, the Chamber of Commerce, and the Realtors. So it's somewhat ad hoc, perhaps, but I think that it actually has a capacity to be able to be a connection point between all of these diverse entities. So that was one point. The second one is about the idea of city-owned land and pursuing city-owned land. One of the things that we're starting to see happening more quickly, fortunately, is the city acquiring land, especially from other governmental entities. When we think about the land swap that's about to occur with the state property at the Midtown, that's significant. We think about the fact that the city has now just purchased state game and fish land off of Richards Avenue, 28 acres. We also know that the housing of the Office of Economic Development and Asset Management is talking to folks at the State Land Commission with some of the properties that they have either within the city or right outside the city. So I think that in addition to city-owned land, the idea of continuing to pursue opportunities of parcels within the incorporated area that are not actually owned by the city, but are owned by other entities that can be worked out with either purchases or trades or other means. There's another parcel in the Midtown campus that you're very well aware of, which is owned by the U.S. Forest Service and the Park Service, which is actually a parcel that blocks access to the park from the Midtown campus and also from accessibility to Camino Carlos Rey. So if somehow you could have within your strategies the continued exploration of other parcels within the incorporated area that are not owned by the city, but are owned by other institutional entities that are not private properties, but are public properties, but are not city properties, I think that that also could be a real opportunity for large parcels that are actually very amenable to development, as is the game and fish property, for instance, on Richards Avenue. So thank you, Madam Chair. It's great work. It's great work that Alex has been doing and this commission, but I did want to just put those out for the kind of the public record if I could. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Kim. It's good to hear from you. We can't see you, but your lovely picture on there on Zoom. And we hope everything's going well in Costa Rica. Hey.
Hey, it's all good.
It's a great suggestion. I don't know, did we capture that, y'all? Because I think that's opportunities that we're using, but we need to explore more. And I didn't realize there was, you said U.S. Forest Service parcel on Midtown?
There's 12 acres that is just to the west of the property that it fronts up against. And it's basically, if you wanted to get to the road that goes by the skate park, by the main park there, you have to go through the Forest Service and Park Service property. It's about 12 acres, but it has the real opportunity for significant multifamily because it's adjacent to the park and very close to Nava Elementary School as well.
Good to know about that, and I think we're aware of that. I'm not sure what we're doing about that, but
I think we're working on it.
And then thank you for the Housing Action Coalition addition. Who's chairing that now, Kim? Or who's ED?
There is no ED at the moment. The de facto chair basically is Daniel Werawath. Very much also, I would say, kind of co-chaired with Alex and Joseph. Those are the three entities who really are kind of driving that. Mike Lofton is also staying involved with it with some of his people, as is Kurt Cron from Habitat for Humanity. The Housing Trust right now is sort of twisting in the wind, but Alex also represents Tierra Contenta Corporation, which is a significant phenomenon within that coalition as well.
A lot of work there.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kim, for your input, and good to see you.
Good to see you all too.
Yeah, thank you, Kim, as always, for your insight and your input. And pura vida.
Pura vida.
Commissioner Torres.
I kind of vaguely remember that the school district also has some land next to Midtown. And since there is a fund that they created for housing for teachers, I don't know if that would present an opportunity to build some housing through the district.
They have their food service building there.
Food service building?
Food service, where they store all their food and.
But I think there's also another parcel.
You know about that?
At the end of that road.
Yeah, because that's where they do the testing for COVID right now.
Oh, is
Back there, yeah.
Some parcels in it near Tierra Contenta, Northwest Quadrant, somewhere else.
That would be good.
Yeah.
Housing for teachers. Okay. Well, I think we've, if anyone thinks about anything else that might come up with, what might be missing in this, or things you want to just explore through and staff, send them an email. And I think we're good with this, unless there's any other, I don't see anyone else having their hand up. All right, so we'll move on to the next item, which is matters from staff.
Sorry, it's just texting Daniel to make sure the plan gets posted on the I don't think I have any matters, other than I wish everybody a lovely upcoming week filled with food and family and relaxation and thankfulness. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. It's always anything else? No. Matters from the commission. Anybody has updates, questions, or anything?
We need to see if we can get a presentation from the sawmill people.
Okay, thank you for that. And if we need contacts, I think you all. But Debbie O'Malley was one of the original folks, and then there's other people that you had them present at one Home Builders Association meeting. It was really good. It was a lot.
Oh, yeah.
I can't remember who else was there. It might have been.
Well, Claudia Isaac was there. She's talking about the workforce housing bond and RFP. That was one of the mayor's first meetings.
It was a good one.
That was a good one.
Any other insights or anything you want to share? All right. For Madison Chair, I don't have anything other than I hope you all get some time off. And I hope I do too. So enjoy and give thanks. And we will see each other at the next meeting, which is Wednesday, December 7th. We'll miss you, Commissioner Marquez. But we hope everyone else can join us. And Tony, can you make sure that Commissioner Watkins was listed as excused if he had an emergency come up, if he cannot join us?
Will do.
Thank you. All right, we are adjourned at 5:30.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you,
5:28.